Just so I know when to start, that's all. No. When I teach in school, I'll do this all day, and all the kids know, and they all sign it every year. All the kids sign my ruler, so it's like 15 years old.
Maybe we're going to get, whacked.
Yeah, like the old. There you go. Yeah.
Good evening to everyone. Welcome here to our church, the Church of Christ Congregational, celebrating our 300 years of mission and ministry, and we're delighted to be able to gather tonight and to learn more about the history of our town and the history of this church. If anybody needs like water, or if you need, we do have those, if you can't hear and you need those hearing, devices, we have some in the back that may be helpful. We have lots of slides that you're going to see pictures, so we want to make sure you're in a place that you can see the pictures. We're delighted to have John Tinkham here. He is a history teacher, or social studies teacher at Cromwell High School. He teaches psychology and civics mostly, but his real love is U.S. history and local history. So I can tell you he spent hours and hours and hours studying.
Fun stuff.
So be nice to him, but
no booing.
But we're happy to have this opportunity.
All right, thank you. Thanks for coming, first of all. And before we get started, two people we're going to introduce, and that is Jim Light and Linda Crawford are going to stand up, right? Stand up so people know who you are. They are in the Newington Historical Society. Jim right there. And a lot of the pictures came as a result of Jim sat down one afternoon with Melanie and I, would let us take a lot of pictures. He's a great resource. If you've never been to the Historical Society, you should visit it. It's got a lot of artifacts. It traces back, and the people there know what they're talking about, so it's kind of fun. So thank you for tonight. All right, you can go to the first slide. We'll get going here. Next one. The entire history of this town and our church all revolves around this geographical gem we all know as the Mill Pond Waterfalls. This is the Mill Pond Waterfall before they lowered it in 1935, 36 in that area. So it had a lot of water power. It generated for mills. So in 1677, we had 4 people came to Newington, to the Mill Pond Falls, and they started a sawmill. They took all the oak trees in the pipe stave swamp and made pipe staves, which are parts that go into barrels and casks and kegs, the slats on the side. It was successful enough that in 1684, Joseph Andrus bought the mill. He moves to Newington. He builds a fortified house over here by where CVS is in that area. And Newington people started coming in from Wethersfield. They came over the mountain and settled all around Mill Pond. The problem they had was it was very difficult to go to church every Sunday as was required way back in Wethersfield. You go to the next slide. This is the road over Cedar Mountain by the Children's Hospital in 1922. Imagine what it looked like 200 years before that. Very difficult. You're carrying all the babies they had back then. You're carrying your musket to protect yourself against animals or Native American hostilities, things like that. And so finally, in 1708, they asked the Wethersfield Church, can we build ourselves a church here in Newington? It's a church, so it went to committee, and what they do, They hemmed and hawed for 2 years. And in 1710, they said, you know what? You're not big enough yet. But I'll tell you what, since we love you, you don't have to come travel to Wethersfield during December, January, February, and March. We can stay in Newington and do that. Finally, 1712 comes, and they give the okay, you can have a church here. In 716, they authorize the building to be built. Go ahead, you can go to the next one. That's the falls again, just you know how powerful the falls are. And finally, in 1722, on October 17th, they ordained and installed Elisha Williams to be our first minister. You can go to the next one. And that's Mr. Williams there. He stayed here for only 4 years. They built him a monster parsonage like where the library is now, a big ballroom where he had his ordination party. But he left to become the rector, the head of Yale University. Newington people were not happy, very mad. They spent all that money, because remember, everything built was built by the members. So they wouldn't let him go. And they said, Yale, if you want him, you're going to pay us 200 pounds at least. In the state, you're going to give us some tax relief. And that's what they did to finally release him. Some of the big things he did when he was here, he sat the church with the head deacon for the first time. You sat in the church depending first on how much money you had, second, your age, third, your parentage, and fourth, your usefulness. So anybody sitting in the back, not a good place to be back in 1722. All right, so Williams left, but Mill Pond had a long history here. You can go to the next one. Here's the falls again. You see the gazebo at the bottom. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But pretty soon, the oak trees went away, over use. So they changed the sawmill into a grist mill to process grain and flour. It burned. After the Revolutionary War, Roger Wells turned it into a distillery where we made hard cider, apple brandy, cherry bounce, things like that. Stayed that way, back and forth to grist mills. Around 1859, a couple from Hartford came and started making cotton bounting. That's what goes inside quilts. That only lasted 2 years. One guy died and the other went off to the Civil War. Next, Mr. Rockwell tried. He had a paper mill that closed in 1883. Then we had Mr. Weatherwall come with his son-in-law, Mr. Carpenter, and they started a paper company. They made wrapping paper, very popular at times, backings for the bow ties, milk bottle caps, and things like that. You can go to the next one. And then Patrick Garvin came. He started the Newington Board Company right around the turn of the century, right around 1900. And you can see the bottom of the Mill Pond Falls. You see the little sluiceway going through there. Remember, that water wasn't just for the factory. It watered a lot of the cattle. We were a very agricultural time then. You can go to the next one. That's a picture of the paper mill at Mill Pond, taken in the early 1900s. You know, like where the Tom Garage used to be down there, it still is there now, the building and all that. So all that in there, in the background was with the Eddy Farm we know today. And that's a big picture of the paper mill. It employed like 6 to 8 people. You can go to the next one. So this picture taken, it says 1925. In the background, you see Willard Avenue, Mill Street there in front of it, Eddy Farm behind it. And so you can see it was a pretty large complex, and it was all powered by the power of the waterfall. You go to the waterfall today, you wonder how that could ever happen, but back then it worked. Go ahead. There's a picture of the back. On the right-hand side, you can see it slopes up. That would be sloping up to Mill Pond itself. And what they would do is they'd have the railroad would truck in all these waste paper. They'd load them on carts, bring them to Mill Pond, and the people along Willard Avenue would complain that there was litter all over Willard Avenue blowing off the carts. So that was a big problem. Okay, you can go to the next one. Close-up of some of the workers. They had 6 to 8 employees. You can tell they look like they can put a hard day's work in. That's really good. You can go to the next one. That's Mr. Garvin and his wife at the bottom of the falls. He built the gazebo, that little bridge across. He also built a summer home and a garden above on the top of Mill Pond Falls. And he also had a 20-foot boat, because the pond used to go all the way to Robbins Avenue. And he also had a bunch of birds around the pond in cages. Peacocks, guinea hens, all these exotic birds that they really liked. And that just shows the success of his factory. You can go to the next one. Swimming, the bottom of the falls there. They had a swimming pool right off to the side of the falls. Kids all jumping in. They have a little, made themselves a little diving board there. You can go to the next one. Again, swimming at the bottom there in the swimming pool they made. There's a board going across the water the kid's sitting on. There's others swimming in the water. So it used to be a very big recreational area. As a matter of fact, it became so popular that if you've ever been to the bottom of the falls today, there's a big sign there about how the Girl Scouts had the first day camp in America there. You can go to the next one. And this is the first day camp in America, the Girl Scouts in 1921. In the background is a 20-foot boat that the Garvins owned. And the Girl Scouts, what they would do is they'd come by trolley, get off over here, they'd walk down and play in all the fields around Mill Pond. They'd go for boat rides, they'd go swimming at the bottom of the falls. And that was their day. It all came to an end in 1929. The paper mill burned to the ground, never to be rebuilt. And then in 1935, the Garvin property was taken over by the town in lieu of back taxes. You can go to the next one. Today, you notice that this picture was taken. You can tell me what the event was. The picture was taken in 1973. Anybody remember what happened weather-wise in 1973? I remember really well because I got off a week from school. Anybody know? The ice storm, very good. We had an ice storm. The big ice storm, so it came a week before Christmas vacation. So we got off, ended up having a 2.5-week vacation. But anyway, the first bridge was built across Mill Pond Falls in 1945. They drained the area where the baseball field is in 1946. In 1952, they put the first asphalt walkway around the pond. All right, you can keep going. The second minister of our church, Simon Backus, he was here for 20 years. And when the Connecticut governor asked the Connecticut militia to go up to Cape Breton, Canada, to check the French from coming in from the north, check on the Abenaki Indians from coming in from the north, the governor asked the militia to go. The militia went. Simon Backus thought it was his job to go there as their chaplain, to be with his fellow people in the congregation, this and that. He caught typhoid, they believe, and he died up in Canada. And that paved the way for the longest tenured minister in our history, Joshua Belden, who came here in 1747 and stayed until 1803. In Belden's reign, just imagine this being a minister in these times. You had the French and Indian War, you had the Revolutionary War, we became a country for the first time. We had all these other minor skirmishes. He was paid not with money, but with cords of wood, barley, oats, wheat, things like that. A little different. It was a big barter society back then. He once gave a sermon exhorting all of his men in the congregation to stop what they were doing and go march to Boston and join the Continental Army to fight the British. 105 men left. 1/5 of the town's population left to go fight in the Revolutionary War. That's a big chunk. So he lost a lot of his membership that way also. He also happened to be in the middle of the big church fight. I talked about this in church a few weeks ago. But when the first church was in disrepair, they had to build a new one somewhere. And there were two big different factions. Martin Kellogg and his people wanted it built right where it is here. And Lieutenant Lemuel Whittlesey wanted it to be built in the southern part of town. The closer you were to a church, the higher your property value. So that was the driving brainstorm behind that. Anyway, it ended up the legislature decided it was going to be built here. And Whittlesey and his followers, 44 people, they built this Episcopal church up on Church Street. It only lasted 13 years. It was a failure. The only remains of it you can see today is the cemetery at the corner of Kelsey and Church Street. But poor Reverend Belden, he started his pasture with like 98 people and 97 people. He left with only 51. All right, you can go to the next one. One person he had, though, famous parishioner he had, was Captain Roger Wells, who became General Roger Wells. But in the Revolutionary War, he went off with the Connecticut militia, and he fought the British. He became good friends with the Marquis de Lafayette, who was very good friends with George Washington. And at the Battle of Yorktown, which effectively ended the Revolutionary War, he led the first troops over the ramparts of the British. He was wounded with a bayonet. And for his service and bravery, Marquis de Lafayette gave him his sword, which he kept for the rest of his life. When he came back to Newington, he built this big house over here. That's where the library is today. You see the church in the background. He built that big home, and all around it, all down Cedar Street as we know it, and around the library, he planted elm trees. He called them the Revolutionary Elms, in commemoration of the Revolutionary War being won. And if you can't imagine what does that look like, there's a picture of it around 1900. Go ahead to the next one. That's Cedar Street looking west. The library would be up ahead on the left. You got all those Revolutionary elm trees right there. So there were a lot of trees around this area back around the turn of the century. We'll see another picture of this a little bit later. You can go to the next one. By 1969, thanks to Dutch elm disease that wiped out all these elm trees on Main Street and on Cedar Street, this is the one that was remaining. That's looking west. Again, the library will be up there on your left, center school on your right. You can go to the next one. Here it is from the library, looking the same way. That tree eventually was taken down in 1970, a year after this picture. You can see on the left the Newington Theater, and the other building you can't see is the next picture. Go ahead. That's the center school, built in 1909. Now, I went to school in that for 5th grade. I think it must have been around 1969 or 70. But when we used to get to sit in these ones facing Cedar Street, it was always fun when there was a funeral going on. Because you'd watch the cars process in, you see the flowers and other things. And if it was somebody you knew in the neighborhood, or your family might be visiting the grave, the service, it was a great deterrent for the day. Anyway, that is center school I looked at when it was first built. We're going to talk about him a little bit later, but Herbert Macy was minister here for 27 years. He had a lot to do with the building of that school. Another place, you can go to the next one. That's Newington High School in 1965. That would be like where the old town hall, where the where Morton's Community Center used to be. That's on the other side of the library, and that's another part of the area there. All right, you can go to the next one. Then we come to that charming fellow. Doesn't he look like a nice guy? I love that picture. I tell Melanie that's the picture of a minister right there. That's what she got to look like. Yeah. He was minister here for exactly 50 years, 1805 to 1855. A week after he was ordained and installed here, he married his wife, Lucy. He planned on retiring and celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary with her. Lucy died 2 months before his anniversary of a sudden disease. When he was here, during a great change in Newington, the railroad eventually came in during his ministry, but he was responsible for starting the Sunday school in our church, incorporating music into our church. He almost demanded, it looks the way he looks like, demanded that everyone tithe 10% of their income to the church. He started a lot of missionary societies. The Lady Aid Society helped people all around the world. And his greatest claim to fame he loved to write about after he retired, his 50 years here, he never took a single day off. He never missed a Sunday. He said he was never sick for all 50 years of his ministry. So in honor of his work ethic, I have a couple slides here of some other people in Newington working in the 1800s. You can go ahead. First, that's the way the church looked in 1845 when he was still minister. You see the horse sheds on the right? Protect your carriage and your horse while you're in the 3-hour sermon. The cemetery is right behind that. That served as a fence for the cemetery also. But it was a nice, looking church right back then. All right, you can go to the next one. I don't know where this is in Newington. I got this from the Historical Society. We couldn't figure out where that was. But they are right there. There's a man, you can see the man here. He's tilling the ground here behind the horses pulling the plow. Newington was very agricultural then. And so a lot of that went on in Newington. If anybody knows where that is, I'd love to know if you know. All right, you go to the next one. Laundry. Laundry was a tough thing. You just can't throw it in the washing machine and watch a movie, then take it out and switch it to the dryer. You had to take it to the stream or whatever, and you had to wring it, or you had to beat it on the rocks, and then you had to hang it all up by hand, no matter the time of year that it was. There's no dryers back then. So laundry used to be like a day chore. You used to set aside an entire day once in a while just to do laundry, because it was very hard. Imagine carrying all that laundry when it's all wet and everything else. It's just hard to do. All right, you go to the next one. Maybe you want to deliver groceries, like the Stop and Shop guy does today. J.W. Camp, the grocer in the Junction part of Newington. You can see he's got the ledger open, and he's also got all the groceries in the back of his wagon. So he'd make those deliveries. So they think they're smart now having home deliveries. Well, they were doing it way back here in the 1800s. All right, you go to the next one. That's the Raleigh Milk and Cream guy. Their farm was at the corner of Willard Avenue and New Britain Avenue. And if anybody you've ever, I know growing up in Niantic, we had a milkman. My mother's here tonight, so she's gonna have to correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure we got eggs, cream, milk, butter from the milkman. Dropped it off before I ever got up in the morning. I never saw the guy my whole life, but it was always there. They came like before dawn. Did they have that in Newington? They must have had that in Newington, right? I don't know. So that's now, in this church, throughout the years, we've had wonderful farmers also, and so I put a couple on here. You go ahead. This is the Eddy Farm. We all remember the Eddy Farm, still there, the remnants of it, the old one, and the next one, Mohawk Farms. So after all this work and everything, I decided we put in a little play pictures here. How did you get a little playing around here in the 1900s? See if you recognize any of that. Couple boys there. You notice the one sitting on the diving board they made? It's like we spend today so much money on entertainment for our kids, and they're just as happy making a board, throwing it in there, and jumping into the water. Don't know positive where that is. Think it might be over where Piper Brook goes through the Hartford Avenue. There's a little back up in there, so it might be over there, but I'm not sure of that. All right, you can go to the next one. That's a picnic. Good picnic, right? Don't they look just relaxed for a picnic? Not exactly sure where that is. Maybe it's up at Belden's Lookout. I don't know where that is. But every time I look at that picture, I see those big cookies. And then I'm thinking, I'd like those. And then I'm thinking, nah, it's probably molasses cookies. I wouldn't like them. But who knows? Aren't they nice big cookies, though? So do you think that's like casual attire? That's the casual attire on a Saturday afternoon picnic? I don't know. They're dating. Could be they're dating. I don't know. Very possible. You can write a story to the picture. All right, you can go to the next one. All right, you can go skating. Who's going to tell me where this skating pond is? It's not Mill Pond and it's not Churchill. And I bet lots of you have driven by it 1,000,000 times in your life. One little hint, it's not really a pond anymore, but the little hill behind it should be the little hint. Where? Nope. That's in the area where the Methodist church is today. You know where they saw all the pumpkins? I walk my dog through there all the time. It's still underwater whenever it rains. But that hill right here goes up to Church Street. Same hill that's there today. So I don't know, is that grandma or is that mom getting helped by the kid? I don't know what it is. Lacing on the skates. But that was, fun to do in Newington. All right, you go to the next one. You want to play golf? Indian Hill's been around since the 19-teens. It's been around forever. Some of you still golf there, I'm sure. Those trucks or whatever, I'm not good with the automobile stuff, but I'm sure they're from like the 19-teens or 20s at the latest. But Indian Hill did start in the teens. Still, those pillars are still here. All right, you go to the next one. Maybe you want to go to the movies. Remember how long the lines used to be at the movies in Newington Center across the street? You can go to the next one. That shows the movie, Anzio. I don't know if anybody saw the movie Anzio. Robert Mitchum, that's a World War II battle in Italy. I saw the movie because he throws rocks across a minefield and steps on them so he won't get himself blown up. But I show you this picture for this reason. See the phone booth right there? A few years ago, when I do this, and my kids, when I go on field trips to school, Millie and I were in New York City to see a Broadway play, whatever, a few years ago. We stopped on the way, we went to the New York Public Library. Went downstairs, they had a phone booth. All the foreign students on a field trip there and others, they were all cramming themselves into the phone booth, all wanted their pictures taken in the phone booth. Cromwell High School, the kids with their TikTok, whenever they see a phone booth, they don't know what one is. They run it, it's a big thing, novelty to them. So it's a big, exciting thing. So that's why I took that picture. All right, you go to the next one. That's a more close-up view of the sign there. Keep going. That's in the lobby inside. You see the cemetery, the tombstones across the street. I love the next picture. Go ahead. See all that popcorn right there? How can you go to the movies and not buy that popcorn when it's such a big pile of it right there in front of you? I remember going 99 cents I used to go to that place. All right, and the next one is the inside of the theater, if you remember one, for reminiscing purposes, if you want to know what it used to look like in there. All right, on to this gentleman. This is Mr. Barrows. He was a minister a little later, in the late 1780s, maybe around 1890. Before I tell you about him, I'm going to tell you a quick story about him I read about in the vault, which cracked me up. He was a minister to Turkey, like a missionary for 25 years. He was only at this church for about 4 or 5 years because he had a very sick health condition. He was a very learned man, he liked to read and meditate and things like that. So one Saturday afternoon, he went to a local stream in Newington. He sat down with his book, and at the same time, he also took a little pole, a fishing pole, and threw it into the water. And just so happened when he was there, one of the deacons of the church, trotted by on their horse, making an errand. The next day after church, he called a deacon's meeting, and he proposed this question: should we be paying him full salary if he has all this idle time to go fishing? That's how people used to keep their ministers accountable back in the late 1800s. All right, you can go to the next one. This is how the church looked when he was there. There's no north wing or south wing yet. The horse sheds are still there. You'll notice there is a house, like where the Farmington Bank used to be or where Dunkin' Donuts is. You can go to the next one. That's a close-up of the house that used to be right next to the church. I think the address looks like, we're 1075, this is 1097, that says. But that was right next to the church back then. And it just shows you around Newington Center there were some bigger homes. All right, you keep going. When 1871 comes along, that's when Newington becomes Newington. And I'm not going to spend hours trying to explain it all, but where the junction in Newington is, that's basically where Francis Avenue, West Hill Road, Willard Avenue all come together. The railroad tracks are all there. Back in 1871, they needed a new bridge to be built over the railroad tracks. We're still part of Wethersfield. The Wethersfield people said, I don't want to pay money to build a bridge way over there in Newington. It's not doing me any good. So they wouldn't do anything about it. So finally, the people in Newington got together. They asked the legislature if they could be incorporated into a separate town. And that's how basically Newington came to be. This picture here is on the town center green. On the right is Wetherwill's blacksmith shop. So think now to where TJ's is, where Vito's used to be, right over there. What eating place was there before Vito's? What'd you get? Black Forest? Oh, I don't think the Black Forest. Maybe, I don't know that name. The Forge, right? The Forge Restaurant. It got the name Forge Restaurant because a forge, a blacksmith shop, used to be there for all those years in the 1800s. And for those really big history buffs, it also used to be called the Newington Diner. I think Vera Spitko from our church, I think her brother used to own the place. I don't know. But anyway, this building on the left, that is an old Methodist church. It was built down on Main Street, like the corner of Main Street and Southwood. It is in disrepair. In 1860, they dragged it down to the center green. That has significance because now that Newington's incorporated, they have to have vote for officers. They had their first election inside that church. 119 men paid a poll tax. Poll tax is illegal now in Connecticut. Back then you had to pay to vote. They paid a poll tax, and they elected the first town group of officers. When this Methodist church was built, it was within sight of Reverend Brace's parsonage. He said they would rather kill me than to see one of my members of my church switch over to the Methodist church. He was not happy with them. All right, you keep going. One other person of note in the late 1800s is a guy on the left there leaning on his cane looking at you. That's Henry Robbins. Henry Robbins lived down there in the house, in the corner of Main and Robbins Avenue. It's like the white brick house there. He owned all the property between there and Mill Pond. He was very much a supporter of women's rights and the women's suffrage movement. So what he did with his property, he advertised to all developers, if anybody wants to develop and build a women's college on my property, you may do so. He didn't have any takers. Why would a woman need to go to college? She's just going to have babies, and she has a husband to tell her anything she has to know. So nobody would do it. But it was, a great gesture on his part. He ended up, what to do with the property? He gave it to the trolley people who built the trolley right down through it on Walsh Avenue. All right, you can keep going. The guy sitting on the right there is Herbert Macy. He was a minister here for 27 years in the early 1890s. For 27 years, he was well known. He was such a good speaker and sermonizer that Harvard Theological Seminary made all their students come here on Sunday to listen to him preach, to critique what he did, to learn from the master. He was well loved in town by many, many people. He was the first unofficial superintendent of schools. You can go to the next slide. That's the schoolhouse around the turn of the century, right around 1900. He was responsible for that center school being built, a school being built in the Junction, and he also helped organize one being built in the south part of town. You can keep going. This right here is another one of those pictures from the Historical Society that I was intrigued with. I think it's a school, but I have no idea. It just says on it, erected 1883, but I don't know, I just like the looks of it, so that's why I put it there. Anybody know what it is? Please let me know. When you do history stuff and you see something you don't know what it is, you always want to know what it is. But haven't figured it out yet. Well, Macy was very involved in the library board also, very active in town. And then Melanie told the story in church once about a year ago, but I'll repeat it now for those who don't know it. Reverend Macy, one Sunday morning, after being here for 27 years, he did a sermon, preached a sermon, and he said, we don't have to go to Europe, across the seas, down south, to help people in need with our missionary work. We can reach out to people within the sight of this steeple. And he pointed over that way, to where the Polish American Club is, that area of town. The Polish people were living there. They had just settled there. They called it the quote-unquote dirtiest part of town. The streets were really, really muddy. They had like open sewers for their bathrooms, all fouled up the mill pond, their cattle and stuff, fouled up mill pond, angering a lot of people. They didn't speak any English. So of course, even today, when we can't understand somebody, they speak a different language, or have different language and different culture than we do, we're naturally afraid of them. It's hard to reach out. And worst of all, what was the worst part of them all? They were Catholic. So, after that sermon, 27 years, deacons had an emergency meeting. They asked for his resignation, and he had to leave the church. He was fired because he suggested that the church help out the Polish people in need right down the street. That's only like 100 years ago. So that's very short in history terms. So just think of how that change happened. So, all right, you keep going. That's how the church looked when Reverend Macy was here. The north wing was added in 1897. So the church got a little bigger then. Again, due to his success, a lot more people were coming. You see the trolley tracks right here in the front of the church. The trolley's in town now. You can keep going. That's how it looked inside the church. Pews, nobody sitting in the balcony right there, but it happens. Keep going. This is from Belden's Overlook. It's on Cedar Mountain. This past Sunday, Melanie and others, I think Janet went right, led the youth group on a walk to Belden's Overlook. Underneath it, where there's no roads or houses yet, that's where like Brentwood, Knollwood, Dogwood, Mountain View Drive, Crestview, Kirkham Street, Atwood Street. Way up here in the background would be where Martin Kellogg School was finally built. This is in the early 1900s. Look how open Newington was, the farmland. No developments anywhere. I grew up on Mountain View Drive. It's in that picture, but there's no Mountain View Drive yet. Now, one of the problems they had in Newington around this time of year and in the early 1900s, they used to say that gypsies used to come here on their circuit. They were like nomads. They would come and stay up on Cedar Mountain, and they would come down and settle in these open areas for parts of the year. But that's a beautiful view from up there. That's what Newington looked like in the early 1900s. All right, you can keep going. The first town hall is being built here. This is in the late 1800s. That is where, like, right across the street right there. That's where it would be, right across the street. That's the town hall. Those kids are playing baseball on the town green. The poles you'll see are for the trolley. In that little building, that's the trolley stop. So if you want to get up on the trolley or get off, that's where you get on and off, right there in the center green. All right, you can go to the next one. This is another picture. You see the trolley stop. You see the town hall in the background. You're on Main Street, heading south. The church is right to the right of those trees. Off to the right is Cedar Street. Straight ahead would be our church. The green used to be bigger than it is now, and animals used to graze on it. So they didn't really cut it a lot. They grazed on it to keep it in shape that way. All right, you can go ahead. This is Cedar Street looking east. That's the Newington Children's Hospital in the background. The picture's like from where our church is. You see a wagon with horses on the dirt and dusty road, a dirt sidewalk, Cedar Mountain in the background. So that's again in the early 1900s. Cedar and Main Street, where this church is, it's a very hub. People coming from all different directions. All right, you can go ahead. Not the greatest photography, but that is Main Street. You're looking north on Main Street. So you're standing out here and looking that way. And what I like about the picture, look at all the trees lining Main Street, both sides. You go to the next one. That is a horse and buggy coming towards the church. Those houses would be like where Ellsworth Street is, right up here, your first right-hand turn after Cedar Street. That horse and buggy is coming towards the church. There's one way in the background too. But it just gives you a feel of what life was like here in the early 1900s. Horse and buggy, dirt roads, and lots of trees. Imagine, for this instance, you were out at night, how dark that must have been on that street with no street lights, all those trees and canopy over you. So that's why lanterns were so important, kind of see candles were so important back then. All right, I think my favorite picture coming up. Go ahead. I love this picture. This is Cedar Street looking west. Church Cemetery on the left. The library would be up there on the left, not built yet, of course. Center School's not built yet, would be on the right. On the right, all those trees in the fence line, that's where Starbucks is today. That was the Wells apple orchard for years. But I love it. You're coming from Main Street, dirt road, and there's right here, there's all, you can go to the left of it or right of it, but it's all not plowed under or anything. So that is Cedar Street looking west, and you see all the Revolutionary elms still there, shading the road, and our cemetery fence is still there. A lot of these pictures were taken by Reverend Macy. He started a photo club in Newington. Photography is one of his passions. So a lot of pictures around the church thanks to Reverend Macy. All right, you can keep going. That is a close-up of the town hall. Inside there was a jail cell. There was a vault. The town band used to practice there. You go to the next one. I should have said on the last one, there's a house right next to the town hall Mr. Hubbard lived in. He died, he left $13,000 to the church. A large sum of money for that time. Because he said the church had always been good neighbors to him. And the pastors had always checked up on him. So we appreciated that. All right, so the new town hall, again, this is the trolley tracks going in front of it. Where those trolley tracks are, that's where the parking lot is for Newington Center right now. And you're going to see in the next couple slides that they tore down the top of the town hall here, and the housing here, they built storefronts in front of it. And they used the trolley tracks as the parking area to redo Newington Center. All right, you go ahead. So again, there's the town hall from the distance. Just so you can see the poles again where the trolley goes. Houses next door to the right and to the left. Go ahead. Remember this building? Was it scary walking up those steps in the back or what? I remember when it was icy out and you walk up these black steps right here with the things through them, there's ice all over them. Do you remember where it was? Where was it? CVS. Where were CVS is today? That was also, that was the police station too, wasn't it? Yeah, the police station, the back end of it, I think. I came to Newington in 1968. And I remember this building when I first got there. All right, you can go to the next one. This is the post office back in the 1880s. That was right next to the church, a few houses down from the church. The post office used to be run over there by the Kilborns, who took care of the cemetery for years, and then E.O. Crawford over here. The Kilborns' biggest customers, again, they got 100 letters one year. 44 of them were addressed to Joab Brace, a minister of this church. All right, you keep going. There's an old picture of Newington Center. You notice there's a drugstore where Carvel's is now. Next to it, there was a furniture store. And eventually, I think it's Benelli, wasn't it? Benelli's Furniture, they moved out to the Berlin Turnpike from Newington Center. You can see the houses now in the background with the storefronts in front of them. All right, you can go to the next one. See how much you know of your old Newington Center. You can't read it. I'm pretty sure that's Sebi's barbershop, right? Yes. Then we had a Sherman-Williams paint store, Dairy Mart. I remember the Village Green, the Cleaners, Newington Hardware. All those good things. You can go to the next one. Thrifty Drug. Everybody has to know Thrifty Drug if you lived in Newington in the 60s or 70s. That package store was there forever. Cousin's Bakery. I used to get some kind of grape drink when I rode my bike down there with my friends, like a Slurpee type thing. But that's how Newington Center all evolved over the years. You can go to the next one. The Meat Center. You know where the Meat Center is now? It's just up Main Street on the left after Cedar Street. So what used to be where Meat Center is today? What? Yeah, that's Goldberg's today. I'm talking the meats. I'm sorry, bad question. I'm a teacher. You can tell I'm a teacher. Bad question. Where Meat Center is today? It's in a building. What used to be in the building where Meat Center is today? Was it really? A what? A knitting shop? No, a knitting shop. Really? No, knitting shop. Killing me. Knitting shop. I used to walk by there to school every morning. That's why I know. You could get a bubble gum then for a penny. Very good, Peter. Home and Circle Market. Harry Mandel. Anybody know the Mandels? The first Jewish family in Newington? They used to run the dance hall, which is on Richard Street in the Berlin Turnpike area, back in like the 1920s, 30s, or something like that. But yeah, that's the Mandels, Home and Circle Market. Harry Mandel. All right, you keep going. We're still in Newington Center. How do you remember the Texaco station next to the church? Right? I remember that. You must remember that. Still paying for it. That's where Dunkin' Donuts is. Used to be a big Texaco gas station there for years. Behind it, they used to have an auto repair shop. I have no idea the name, but they used to be there for a while before our church kicked them out and bought the new center core. What was it called? Don's. Okay. All right, keep going. Now we're really going to put you to the test. This is Goodale's produce farm. Vegetable stand, produce. Goodale Drive down here off Main Street is named after the Goodales. That was in Newington Center for many, many years. There's many entries in the church where they took a break, they went over to Goodale's to get something. The buildings you see, that building on the right, that is Keeney Manufacturing. The building is still here, but Keeney's not, but the building's still here. And now test your memory again. In the center picture there's a roof in the background. Anybody want to guess what that is? It's on Market Square. That is the old post office. Before the post office moved on to where it is now, that was the old, that was when I was in town. We used to go there. And for any of you who delivered papers, the Hartford Current used to have their office right next to the post office. You go in there with your those little coupons you gave all the customers every week with your little money. So that is Main Street, right over here, forever. You can go to the next one. This is Goodale's again, another view of it. The big thing they have in the history books, these lights right here, for those of you who like politics. It said the Democratic Party used to caucus there late into the evenings under the lights of the Goodale fruit stand. How are we doing for time? I have no idea what time it is. I don't want to talk forever. 7:45. We'll fly along then. Got 15 minutes. All right, you can go to the next one. And the firehouse was, of course, still there. The building is still there. That's where the firehouse used to be for years, next to the church. Back in the 1800s, they used to have a big iron bar on the green they used to bang to alert the firemen. Okay, you can go to the next one. Newington Center had the parades. That's the one after World War I. You go to the next one. That's the Centennial Parade, I think 1971. They used to walk down Main Street, turn right on Market Square, I think. Then maybe went all the way, ended up at Cedar Street, I don't know. You go to the next one. This is the old log church. So, you can go to the next one to get a close-up of it. That's our church float. Birthday greetings from Newington Church, the old log church. This was in 1971. Does anybody know any of those people? I don't know who they are. They got to be how old right now? They'd have to be about 71? From 71, that's 29 and 22? Yeah, like 50, and you add on 5. They're like around 60 years old. Right? 55 to 60. But I personally don't know who they are. If anybody knows who they are, that'd be fun to find out and tell them there's a nice picture of them. It'd be interesting how many of the families are still in the church who are in that there now. All right, you go to the next one. Clem Lemire, who Clem Lemire Field's named after, of course. He's right here with his hat day, 1956, just for fun. Again, simple things for pleasure, fun. You don't need tons of money to have fun with kids. Go ahead. Then, of course, we had the trolley in the early 20s. It came up from New Britain. That's the cattle crossing. They don't want the cattle going across the tracks, so you build this underneath here so you can go underneath the tracks. Keep going. That gets you to the top of the hill. You get Maple Hill Avenue. Keep going. You go down Robbins Avenue. Next, Thompson Street Station. The golf course is way over there and behind it. Those houses are still here today. We went and looked at them. Keep going. Went all the way down to Walsh Avenue. Take a left on Walsh to Henry Robbins' property. That's Taft and Walsh. Look how straight that was. That's how come Walsh Avenue was so long and straight. That is Walsh Avenue today. All right, go ahead. They got to the center green there in the background. You go to the next one. It's another one of the trolley in the center green, 1937, the last run. You go ahead, one last trolley picture. Go ahead. Then it goes down to Connecticut Avenue into Hartford. Connecticut Avenue was the trolley tracks right there, if you've ever been to Connecticut Avenue. The trolley opened up a lot of transportation here in Newington. All right, you go to the next one. Now we get to Reverend Harold Burden, 1929. Remember, when he was here, his 33 years, whatever, the town grew from 4,500 to 19,000. And the church grew really hard and fast. And that's why we have this new building today. Keep going. This is how the church looked in the 1940s, early 50s when Burden was here. Still only had the north wing and this one. All right, go ahead. He started old folks concerts. They dressed up in garb. You go to the next one. And they all played around and tammed it up for the camera, this or that. That was a fun way to get people together. Go ahead. That's the Sunday school class in 1947. And what's kind of remarkable about that, you think about it, from 41 to 45, World War II was going on, so there weren't a lot of babies happening. I don't know who any of those people are. I'm sure I do if I heard their names. All right, you keep going. That's the old church, a dinner in the old church. I'm just impressed how big the candles were. That's why I put it in here. Those candles are so high. If I ever at a table with a candle that high, I'd knock it over. I'd hit it with something. There's no way that would be standing at the end of the meal. We might. I don't know. All right, go ahead. Sunday school, partitioned off from the old building. That's why you ended up having a new one, because they're running out of room. Keep going. Old-time minstrel, barn and modern dancing. Why don't we do some barn dancing in the church again, huh? You could do that. Get us barn dancing. Mr. and Mrs. Club, held at Newington High School. Again, that's during World War II. February 12th, the war didn't end until August of 45. All right, keep going. PF group, for the first time, got together. We started the PF groups. They went to New York City. I love the old suitcase. I still use one like that, kind of. Go ahead. Church then and today, we have to have our Christmas pageant, right? That's the old church. Keep going. John Wallace and Bob Christensen playing horseshoes at Churchill Park, I believe, a church picnic. John Wallace Middle School is named after John Wallace, and both of them had a lot to do with the building of this church. They were head of the building committee. All right, go ahead. That's just a picnic at Churchill Park, and there's Ralph Gilbert standing on the left there. Carol Gilbert, is that his wife's name? Ralph and Carol Gilbert, I think. All right, keep going. The choir started up here during Burden's time, got to be a lot bigger. If you know, who do I remember from this picture? If you know Ron Otis, his mother Ethel Otis is in that picture, in the choir. All right, you keep going. Circle 3. The church had Circle 1, Circle 2, Circle 3, and Circle 4. That's just Circle 3 having their Christmas party. I wouldn't want to tangle with that group of people. They look like they know what they're doing and they mean business. All right, you can go to the next one. That is the junior choir. The church had no room. The church had no room to sit them in the church and to have them sit anywhere. They lined up outside of the church to process in. That's how big the choir was. For those curious, this will blow your mind. In 1972, according to the church records, I'm not saying this is true, false, or otherwise, it said that our peak attendance year, 1972, in Sunday school, there were 400 kids registered for Sunday school with 105 Sunday school teachers. 1972. Really? Go ahead. There's again, now, I'm guessing, this is what I'm thinking here. I think this is the Morton Community Center gym, because when between this building being torn down and a new one being built for a year, they were there, and you see the scoreboard clock and the basketball floor. Really crowded though, wasn't it? All right, keep going. That's just Don Amadon and Wally Davis building up the money so they can do it. I had a good time with both of them, spent many hours talking with them, and I just like those guys. So that's why I threw them in there. All right, keep going. The last service in the old church, March of 1960. Look how crowded it is. The balcony's packed, downstairs is packed. Time for a new, bigger church. All right, you keep going. Another one I loved here. Do you remember, anybody remember? I remember these. Easter Sunday. We used to have sunrise service, and then you would come back to the church for breakfast. And they had Easter breakfast in the church. And that's what this is, Easter breakfast. And what I like about this is two things. One, they all have these sugar pop cereal things that you take when you're camping, and you pop open the little serrated edge and pour milk in them. And the other thing that amazes me about this picture, there are a lot of kids at that table, and I only see one adult. And I'm just wondering, after the Easter Bunny sugar high, what that must have been like. But again, an Easter community. We always came back to the church after. All right, go ahead. Burden was on the library board for 25 years. That's how Lucy Robbinswell Library used to look when he was on the board. All right, keep going. The 250th anniversary in 1972, that's where they had their banquet. D. Pasquale, does that sound like where Friendly's is today in that area? Circuit City used to be there. I have no idea what's there now. Is this still there? I don't know what's there. What's it called? P.C. Richards is there now. Very good. All right, you keep going. I just put 4 slides of the turnpike up here since it grew so much when Burden was here. Everyone knows Morrison Dairy, of course, with the cows on top. How could you forget that? One thing people don't remember, tour buses came all around to stop here on their way between Boston and New York. Very popular place. You can go ahead. That's on there for the sign for Emerson Wild Animal Farm. Anybody go to the Wild Animal Farm? It's where the Department of Transportation building is now. They had a tiger. How could you not go to there? They had a tiger in that Indian teepee. Yeah, you never went there? Ah, love that place. Okay, keep going. Frida Farms, that's where Dairy Queen is today. That was the first big attraction on the Berlin Turnpike when it opened to attract people to Newington. They called it high-test ice cream because of the cars. You can go to the next one. That's just a picture of Frida Farms on the right. McDonald's would be up there on the left. It's not built yet. And the Hartford Drive-In would be up there on the right. All right, you can go ahead. That's taken from the Hartford Drive-In looking south. You notice how wide the median is? Drag racing was a problem because when you went, you'd race from here down to Richard Street and back, and people used to try to cheat and cut across the median because it was grass. Oh, my next slide I love too. Go ahead. This is the opening show bill for the opening of the Hartford Drive-In Theater. This whole top just cracks me up. It says, a new and utterly delightful experience awaits you at America's most beautiful drive-in theater, high above the Hartford and New Britain skyline. What can be more romantic and beautiful than that? Nightly dusk till midnight, 60 cents per person, cars are free. And people get confused when I do this talk other places that had the colored cartoons. That's not about African Americans, that's about the color. Walt Disney wasn't colored, nobody had color yet. So that was a big novelty to go to the movies to see colored pictures. All right, you can go ahead. This is Ball Quarry, the other side of town. That started as a business that watered all the streets in Hartford from the dust. Keep going. That's just Ball Quarry. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. There you go. Next one. Good. You go ahead. The hospitals in Newington. Cedar Crest Sanatorium. See the Hartford in the background. You go to the next one. It's a view from the air. Everybody must remember the checkerboard water tower. We who lived on Mountain View Drive, we were always told, head towards the checkered water tower, that's where the home is. It was a big landmark, it's no longer there. Keep going. That's your home for the incurables, I still hate that name. Newington Children's Hospital, off of Cedar Street, back in the early when it started in 1898, go ahead. Roger Wells from our church, go ahead. He had a lot to do with the Children's Hospital getting there, he's mentioned in this article. Roger Wells in 1898 drew a petition asking for a special town meeting to consent to the establishment of an asylum in town. So that was beautiful right there. Those kids needed help and they got the help, and our church had a lot to do with it, which is nice. All right, go ahead. That's a more modern picture of it. And we'll do a shout out now to Don and Linda Chafee. Miss seeing them in church. They came here for years. Don Chafee worked at the Children's Hospital and did a lot of things with the wheelchair Olympics and everything through the Children's Hospital. All right, you go to the next one. That is the Hartford Regional Center. The term of the day was that used to help the mentally retarded back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That's to the bottom of Cedar Mountain. You can go ahead. The Veterans Hospital, before we had athletic fields and high schools around it. Wide open territory again. Farmland again, forever and ever in Newington. Slowly filled up. Go ahead. Men's communions breakfast became a big thing in the 60s and 70s. I remember going to those. It used to be on Palm Sunday, I think. But it used to be crowded like that all the time. There'd be a church service, and then you go downstairs and have a great breakfast. Some of you, I'm sure, know some of those people. I have no idea if it is. Doesn't it look like, this looks like Dick Perry to me, but I don't know if it is. And this looks like Ralph Gilbert to me right there. But again, I don't know if it is. All right, you can go ahead. Arnold Tozer was minister. What did we do on Christmas Eve? The Christmas Eve service was from 11:30 to 12:15. At midnight, he played White Christmas, and all the college kids home with their sweeties would kiss each other in the balcony, and it was a big deal. And that was a big way the church operated on Christmas Eve here for years. 11:30 to 12:15. 12 midnight. Go ahead. That's Arnold Tozer in the front there in the striped shorts, the bald head. He took a group of kids and adults up to Mount Washington. All right, you can go ahead. That's our 250th anniversary. Go ahead. That's Arnold Tozer. They planted a tree out front that's still there. And a commemoration. Stand behind them there on the left. All right, you go ahead. Next came Norm Levinson and Ed Clapp for a little while. When Norm Levinson was here, see if anybody remembers this. I don't. Go ahead. This is a fashion show held down in Fellowship Hall. That is Carolyn Neely, fashion, showing off something, I don't know what. Anybody go to that fashion show? I wasn't there. But that was a big deal. There's only a few left, we're almost done. Go ahead. Ken Brooks then came. When Ken Brooks came, he got the church kind of refocused on a lot of social issues, which was a good thing. He dealt quickly with the Columbine disaster out in Colorado, the beginning of his ministry. He had a large part in getting this church towards open and affirming eventually, breaking through a lot of barriers. He would go down to an orphanage in Haiti to help the people down there. And the church had a lot of successes during his reign here. All right, you can go to the next one. Again, there's Don and Doris Amadon, just because they did so much for me in my life. Keep going. Melanie told me to put this in. She said, that shows the difference between the sanctuary today and then, after our sanctuary improvement project. I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said, do you know what color the carpet is now? And I thought it was red, but it's only red in that picture. The carpet's red, the chandeliers are new. I didn't even know we got new chandeliers. I'm not very observant, but she said I have to put the picture in only because I'm blind sometimes. But that again happened. You can go to the next one. You know who that is? Come on, you gotta know who that is. Oh, who are these old-time church members? That's embarrassing, you don't know who that is. I'm picking on Cherry right now. Come on, that was good.
What year? Because I wasn't here till 76.
Oh, he was a fixture in our church in the 1990s when I don't know. That's Gid Wells when he was a younger kid. That's Dr. Gideon Wells. He did a lot for this church. He did a lot for Newington. He was a doctor, and he also did a lot with the Historical Society in town, the library, of course, and this and that. I had to throw that in there because he was a good guy, too. Betty Baxter, of course, I should have thrown her in there. She's all about the history of Newington. She and her husband, Elmer, are longtime members here. That's all I got. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, hopefully it's something in an hour, not too much. What time is it? Oh, that's good. But anyway, it's always fun to reminisce. Yeah. Yeah, you can say it up. Yeah. That's it. That's all I got. I could talk history for the next 2 hours, but she'd yell at me. What's this church sanctuary right here was built in 1960. The first church was from 1722 to 1797. The second one was from 1797 to 1960, but they added on the north wing in 1897, and they added on the education wing in 1949.
You want a story about the old chandeliers?
Let's hear the story about the old chandeliers. Go.
According to Ron Otis, who's a lifelong member here.
Yeah, he's coming to the 300th, I think.
I hope. They used to get in the balcony and shoot paper.
Oh, yeah.
Paper airplanes.
I was one of them.
Try and land them in the flat.
I was one of them.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah. That's right. That was a big deal. Church was a gathering place. What are we talking about? Who? Oh, everybody should come to Indian Hill on Friday night. Is it Friday night? No, Sunday. On Sunday, October 16th, for the anniversary. Because our anniversary day is actually October 17th to 1722. Sunday's the 16th, but the head of the new Southeast, what's the Southeast Conference we're in now? He's going to come, no? What's it called? What is it? Southern New England Conference is going to be the guest minister that day, and is going to give us a service to commemorate our 300 years. That's close. She should just talk, you know? I know, you can get up and do that. I know. Who cares about the 17th? I'm thinking about tonight. And I'll tell you what, I got another thing history-wise. I got the greatest picture the last weekend from Paul Pelaya from up in the belfry there, of the bells. I got to find out about the inscription on the bell you sent me. I've never been up there in a while.
My mother used to ride the trolley, and she used to have to walk from where they lived on Main Street.
Yeah.
And they took the trolley from Robbins Avenue to go to school in New Britain because high school was held in
Yep, you're right, yep. It's a nice story.
He's also a lifeguard at Churchill
Park.
Park. Before it became real cool.
Curtis's grandfather used to run the Hall Farm down there, right past Churchill Park on the right, back in the day. All right, well, thank everybody for coming and everything else. All right, good time.